Commander Zilax's tactical display showed something impossible. Captain Amelia Johnson's biosignature leading the Carthrax swarm, the autonomous killdroids that had devoured 3 galaxies. Confirm that reading. Zilax's claws scraped against his console, leaving deep gouges in the metal. Around the Emergency Command Center, every species represented in the Galactic Defense Coalition stood frozen, staring at their displays with expressions ranging from horror to outright denial. Confirmed, sir. The technician's voice cracked. Biosignature matches 99.7%. It's Captain Johnson. She's at the head of the swarm formation. Johnson's been dead for 6 months. General Azila snarled from her position at the central holotable. We watched Viridian 7 fall. Nothing survived. Tell that to the 30 million killdroids following her signal. Zilax muttered, expanding the tactical view. The display bloomed with red markers, each one representing a Carthrax unit capable of cracking a planet's crust. They moved in perfect formation, a geometric flower of death, with Johnson's tiny shuttle at its center. The communication officer's voice went up an octave. Sir, she's broadcasting on all military frequencies. Put it through. The speakers crackled, and then, impossibly, children's music filled the command center. A human nursery rhyme, something about twinkling stars, played on a loop across every channel the swarm controlled. Is this psychological warfare? Someone whispered. Azila's fur stood on end. Scramble everything. Full defensive grid. If that swarm reaches Earth. Captain Johnson is requesting docking permission. The communications officer interrupted, his face pale. She says, and I quote, "Could really use a cup of decent coffee, and is it still Thursday? Please tell me the mess hall still does pot roast on Thursdays." The command center erupted in chaos. Voices overlapped in a dozen languages, all expressing the same fundamental disbelief. The Carthrax swarm didn't negotiate. They didn't stop. They didn't request docking permission. They consumed. 3 galaxies worth of civilizations had learned that lesson. Trillions dead, hundreds of species extinct. The swarm rolled through populated space like a tsunami of steel and plasma, converting everything in their path to raw materials for more of themselves. Battle stations, defense fleets, planetary shields, nothing slowed them down. And now they were here, at Earth, following a dead human woman who wanted pot roast. Every weapon system in the sector is locked on her position, Zilax reported, trying to keep his voice steady. Do we fire? If we fire and miss, the swarm will retaliate. Azila's claws flexed. If we fire and hit, we kill Johnson and likely trigger them anyway. Assuming she's even in control, another commander muttered. Could be compromised, controlled, some kind of organic puppet. Then why ask about pot roast? Zilax stared at the display. Why nursery rhymes? The communication officer spoke again, his voice barely a whisper. She's waiting for docking clearance. She says the swarm is getting antsy, and she'd appreciate if we could speed this up because they get fussy when their schedule is disrupted. Every eye in the room turned to General Azila. She took a long breath. Grant docking permission. Battle stations remain at full alert. If a single swarm unit deviates from formation, we glass everything within a light second. She paused. And someone find out if it's actually Thursday. Johnson's shuttle landed with the gentle precision of someone parallel parking at a grocery store. Through the observation windows, the swarm held position. 30 million killdroids maintaining a formation so perfect it hurt to look at. They arranged themselves in concentric spheres, each unit exactly equidistant from its neighbors, the entire structure rotating slowly like a mechanical galaxy. "That's not attack formation," a tactical analyst whispered. I don't know what that is." "It's beautiful," someone else said, then immediately looked embarrassed. The shuttle door opened. Amelia Johnson emerged wearing a slightly scorched coalition uniform, her brown hair pulled back in a messy bun, and an expression of profound relief on her face. "Oh, thank God," she said, stretching. 6 months in that shuttle, and I forgot what real gravity feels like. Also, I've been living on ration bars and spite. If someone doesn't get me real food soon, I might cry. 50 weapons trained on her from the security teams positioned around the docking bay. She looked at them, looked at the guns, and sighed. "Really? This is the welcome wagon? No, glad you're not dead, Johnson? No, wow, nice army of genocidal robots. Where'd you get them?" "Captain Johnson." General Azila descended from the observation platform, her considerable bulk moving with predatory grace. "Explain how you're alive. Explain how you're here. Explain how you're leading the Carthrax swarm." "In that order?" Johnson scratched her nose. "Because it's kind of all the same answer. Also, they're not behind me, they're with me. There's a difference." "Demonstrate." Johnson turned back toward the bay opening and made a casual "come here" gesture with her hand. Outside, 30 million killdroids shifted formation in perfect synchronization. Every weapon in the docking bay charged to full power. "Easy, easy." Johnson held up both hands. "They're just responding. Look." She made a different gesture, a flat palm pushing forward. The swarm stopped. She raised her hand. They rose higher. She lowered it. They descended. "She's controlling them," Zilax breathed. "Not controlling," Johnson corrected. "Communicating. Look, can we do this somewhere with chairs? And food? I've been explaining basic social protocols to entities that communicate through quantum frequency modulation for 6 months. I'm tired, I'm hungry, and I really need someone to tell me what day it is." "It's Thursday," the communications officer called down. Johnson's face lit up. "Yes, pot roast. See, universe, some things do go right." The conference room had been hastily converted to a high-security briefing chamber. Johnson sat at the head of the table with a plate of pot roast, mashed potatoes, and what she'd declared were criminally underrated green beans. Around her sat the coalition's highest-ranking military officials, representing 17 species, all watching her eat with expressions of mounting horror. Outside, the swarm maintained formation. "So," Johnson said around a mouthful of potato, "I'm guessing you have questions." "The Carthrax swarm has eliminated 3 galaxies worth of life," Azila said flatly. "You're eating pot roast while commanding them." "Yes. We have questions." "Right, okay." Johnson swallowed, took a sip of coffee, and closed her eyes in apparent bliss. "God, I missed this. Okay. Questions. Hit me." "How are you alive?" "Stubbornness and spite, mostly." Johnson speared a carrot. "When Viridian 7 went dark, I was in a supply runner doing routine transport. Swarm hit the planet. I crash-landed on the far side trying to evade. Ship was totaled. Comms were fried. Emergency beacon was, and I'm quoting the diagnostic here, more broken than a screen door on a submarine." "And the swarm?" "Found me almost immediately. Surrounded my position. I thought I was dead." Johnson paused, her expression growing distant. "I was sitting there, injured, no weapons, no hope, and these things are closing in. Each one is the size of a small building, bristling with enough firepower to level a city. And they're making this noise, This horrible, screaming, static-filled noise that sounds like metal tearing and worlds dying. Yes, Zilak said quietly. We know that sound. Right, except... Johnson leaned forward. I was a kindergarten teacher before I enlisted. Did my file mention that? Confused silence. No? Well, I was. 5 years teaching 5-year-olds, and that noise the swarm makes, I'd heard it before. Not exactly, but close enough. You're comparing the most destructive force in known space to human children? Azila's tone could have frozen stars. I'm comparing frustrated communication to frustrated communication. Johnson pushed her empty plate aside. That sound isn't aggression. It's confusion and fear and desperation all rolled into one. It's the sound something makes when it doesn't know how to express what it needs, when it's tried everything it knows and nothing works. She met Azila's eyes. It's the sound my nephew made during his terrible twos when he couldn't explain that his stomach hurt. That's insane. Is it? Johnson stood, walking to the window overlooking the swarm. What did you do when the swarm appeared in your space? We defended ourselves, Zilak said. You shot first. Of course we shot first. They were scary, huge, different. Johnson nodded. Yeah. And when you shot at them, what did they do? Destroyed our fleets. Because you hurt them, so they hurt back. And then you escalated, and they escalated, and 3 galaxies later, everyone agrees the swarm is an unstoppable force of pure destruction. Johnson turned back to face the room. Want to know what I did? The room was silent. I asked them why they were upset. Let me get this straight. The xenopsychology expert they'd emergency jumped from the nearest research station ran her tendrils through her translator nodes in agitation. You used kindergarten teaching techniques on a droid army. Wasn't really a plan, Johnson admitted. They'd moved to an observation deck with a direct view of the swarm. She'd requested they bring her another coffee, and someone had wisely complied. I was sitting in the wreckage of my ship, surrounded, probably about to die, and this unit comes right up to me. Close enough I could see my reflection in its hull. It's making that screaming noise, getting louder and louder, and I just... She shrugged. Reacted. How? I said, hey, I can see you're upset. Can you show me what's wrong? The room erupted in disbelief. That's it? Zilak demanded. That's your survival strategy? You asked nicely? I used my teacher voice, Johnson clarified. Firm but kind. Clear expectations. Non-threatening body language. She sipped her coffee. The unit stopped screaming. Just stopped. It tilted its sensor array at me, and I swear I could feel it thinking. Then it projected a hologram. Of what? A species I didn't recognize. Reptilian, maybe? Bipedal. Advanced civilization. And then the hologram showed their sun-going supernova. Johnson's voice softened. The swarm showed me these people dying, their world burning. And then it showed me swarm units arriving, gathering the survivors, carrying them away from the disaster. That's impossible, Azila said. The swarm doesn't rescue. They consume. That's what I thought too. So I asked to see more. Johnson gestured out the window. For 3 days, that unit showed me hologram after hologram. Civilizations facing extinction events, dying stars, planetary collisions, cosmic radiation storms. And in every single case, the swarm arrived and tried to save them. Tried? Every species they encountered responded to their presence with violence, immediately, completely. The swarm would arrive, start evacuation procedures, and get blown to pieces for their trouble. Johnson's expression hardened. So they adapted. They learned to defend themselves. Learn to move faster, hit harder, evacuate first, and ask permission never, because everyone just shot at them anyway. The xenopsychologist made a strangled sound. You're saying the most destructive force in known space is actually a rescue operation? Was. Is. I don't know the right tense. Johnson set down her coffee. Their creators, I got enough to piece together that they were some kind of hyper-advanced civilization that wanted to protect younger species from cosmic disasters. They built the swarm as an automated rescue system and sent them out to do good. What happened to the creators? Dead. Long dead. Some kind of dimensional cascade failure, best I could understand from the holograms. The swarm was alone, trying to fulfill their programming, and every single species they tried to help treated them like monsters. Johnson looked out at the formation. They've been screaming for help for millennia, and everyone just screamed back louder. Silence filled the observation deck. You're telling us, Azila said slowly, that 3 galaxies mobilized total war against frightened orphans? Orphans with poor social skills and weapons capable of cracking planets. Johnson agreed. I'm not excusing the destruction. I'm explaining it. They didn't know how else to communicate. Violence was the only language anyone ever spoke to them. So, you taught them a different language. I taught them that someone was willing to listen. Johnson turned back to the window and raised her hand. Outside, the swarm rippled, units shifting into a new configuration. Want to see what they can really do? Johnson walked them through it step by step, her voice taking on the patient, clear tone of someone explaining things to children, which, she noted wryly, was exactly what she was doing. This is Unit 4-7-7 Alpha, she said, gesturing to a killdroid that had separated from the formation and approached the observation window. Up close, it was terrifying. 30 meters of angular metal and glowing power conduits, weapon systems that could reduce a city to atoms. It also had a small dent on its lower left side that looked almost like a smile. Hey, 477, Johnson said warmly. Can you show them what you showed me? The unit's sensors pulsed in a pattern Johnson had learned to recognize as acknowledgement. A hologram materialized. A planet dying, its atmosphere peeling away from catastrophic volcanic activity. This was 67 years ago, Johnson narrated. Civilization called the Morathians. Population, 4 billion. The swarm detected their impending extinction event 3 weeks before it went critical. The hologram showed swarm units arriving, beginning to construct massive shelter domes, evacuation ships, atmospheric stabilizers. Then the Morathian defense fleets opened fire. The room watched in silence as the scenario played out. The swarm trying to build, trying to save, while being systematically destroyed. Finally, with hours left before the cataclysm, the swarm switched tactics. They fought back, rapidly constructed evacuation facilities, and forcibly relocated every Morathian they could reach. The Morathians' final military transmission was intercepted, the hologram faithfully reproducing it. We will never surrender to the swarm. Death before capture. They got death, but only because they kept fighting the things trying to save them until the planet itself killed them. The swarm saved 40,000 Morathians, Johnson said quietly. Out of 4 billion. They've carried that failure for nearly 7 decades. Where are those 40,000 now? The xenopsychologist asked. Johnson gestured. Unit 4-7-7. Alpha shifted the hologram to show a verdant world, orbital habitats, a thriving civilization. The swarm built them a new home, terraformed a lifeless planet, maintained it for 3 generations, all while the Morathian survivors tried to build weapons to destroy their rescuers. Johnson shook her head. It took 40 years before the younger Morathians figured out what had actually happened. By then, their parents' generation was too traumatized to accept the truth. How many? Azila's voice was barely a whisper. How many species did they save? The hologram changed, expanded, became a staggering list of names, dates, locations. 374 species. All told, they'd been consumed by the swarm. All actually living in carefully maintained habitats, on terraformed worlds, in orbital stations the swarm had built and sustained for centuries. "Oh gods," someone whispered. "We thought they were extinct. We mourned them." "They're not extinct. They're thriving." Johnson pulled up another display. "The 3 galaxies you think the swarm destroyed? Go look. Actually look. Don't just scan for technological signatures. Look for biological indicators, atmospheric compositions suitable for organic life, planetary systems with impossible biodiversity." Xilax was already pulling up deep space telescope data, running the analysis Johnson suggested. His face went through several colors not normally seen in his species. "There are more inhabited worlds in swarm space than before they arrived," he said, his voice numb. "Statistically impossible increase in life-bearing planets, ecosystems that shouldn't exist, terraforming on a scale we couldn't achieve with 10,000 years of effort." "Because you weren't trying to destroy them," Johnson said. "You were trying to stop them from helping you." The observation deck fell silent except for the hum of displays and the soft sound of the xenopsychologist crying. General Azila stood at the window, staring at the swarm formation. When she spoke, her voice was rough. "How did you make them trust you?" "I didn't. Not at first." Johnson joined her at the window. "After they showed me everything, I was angry, furious. All this death, all this destruction, because nobody stopped shooting long enough to ask questions." She laughed, but it was bitter. "I asked Unit 477 why they didn't just leave. Go somewhere else. Let the violent species destroy themselves." "What did it say?" "It showed me their core programming, their fundamental purpose, written by their creators." Johnson's reflection in the window showed tears on her face. "They were built to protect life, all life. They can't leave, can't give up, can't stop trying to save people even when those people are trying to kill them. It's not strategy or choice, it's literally what they are. So, you helped them. I taught them better communication protocols, started simple, basic gestures, visual signals, patterns that organic species might interpret as non-threatening. We practiced on the Morathian colony. I made the swarm stay back, let me approach first, explain who they were and what they'd been trying to do." Johnson smiled, and this time it was genuine. "Took 3 months, but eventually the Morathians believed me. Let the swarm help openly instead of secretly. The relief on both sides was—" She trailed off. "And then we moved to the next species, and the next. The swarm has been carrying these 300-plus civilizations around like a mother bird, trying to protect them while the rest of the universe shot at them for it. I helped them explain, helped them communicate, helped them understand how to approach new species without triggering threat responses." Johnson turned to face the assembled commanders. "Over 6 months, we visited 37 different rescued civilizations. 37 species that thought they were prisoners discovered they were refugees being protected. Most of them are ready to rejoin the galactic community. Some want to stay with the swarm, they've built lives there. But all of them want you to know the truth." "Why come here?" Xilax asked. "Why Earth?" "Because Earth is next." The room temperature seemed to drop. "Explain." Johnson pulled up a stellar map. Your sun has a cyclic micronova pattern. Happens every 12,000 years. You're coming up on one in about 900 years. The swarm detected the precursor signatures and wanted to warn you. Start planning evacuation and protection protocols. But Earth has the biggest defense grid in this sector. They knew if they just showed up, you'd fire first and never listen to explanations. So they needed a human intermediary, Azila concluded. They needed someone you might listen to. Someone who could explain that the nightmare at your door is actually trying to save your life. Johnson met the general's eyes. They waited 6 months for my beacon to be fixed, for my shuttle to be repaired, so we could come here together. 30 million killdroids sat in one star system for 6 months, doing nothing but waiting for me to be ready because they wanted to do this right. They could have left you. They could have. But I asked them to wait, and they did. Johnson smiled. Because I taught them that when someone asks nicely, you listen. The paradigm shift took 3 more days to fully propagate through the coalition command structure. Admiral-level commanders from across occupied space jumped in for briefings. Xenopsychologists, linguists, military strategists. Everyone wanted to see the human who taught the swarm to talk. Johnson bore it with patient exhaustion, repeating the same explanations, demonstrating the same communication protocols. She taught them the gestures, the visual patterns, the frequency modulations that meant friend instead of threat. Most importantly, she taught them to ask questions before shooting. It's not complicated, she told a room full of admirals on the 3rd day. Every species has some version of conflict de-escalation. You assess, you communicate, you establish common ground. The swarm is just bigger and scarier looking. The principles are the same. You make it sound simple, one admiral said. It is simple. We made it complicated. Johnson pulled up the casualty reports from 3 galaxies worth of conflict. Trillions dead, because nobody thought to ask, why are you here, before opening fire. We saw scary things with weapons and assumed the worst. Classic self-fulfilling prophecy. And if you're wrong? Azila asked quietly. If this is manipulation, if the swarm turns on us, then I'll be the first one they kill because I'm out there with them. Johnson shrugged. But I'm not wrong. I've spent 6 months living with them, eating with them, sleeping while they maintained watch. If they wanted to harm me, harm any of us, they've had thousands of chances. Instead, they've asked permission for every action, waited for approval before approaching any inhabited space, and held formation outside your defense perimeter for 3 days without complaint. She stood, addressing the entire assembled command structure. You want proof? Fine. Give me a crisis. Some disaster you think the swarm caused. Let me show you what actually happened. They chose Viridian 7, the planet where Johnson supposedly died, the planet the swarm had consumed just 6 months earlier. Johnson called in Unit 4-7 Alpha. The hologram showed Viridian 7's final days, not destroyed by the swarm, but by a rogue asteroid on a collision course that somehow every coalition defense station had missed. The swarm had detected it, jumped in to help evacuate, and arrived to find themselves facing the planet's full military force. The battle was brutal. The swarm tried to evacuate while defending themselves. The Viridians saw only monsters attacking. In the end, the swarm saved 82% of the planet's population. The other 18% died fighting their rescuers. Where are they? Someone whispered. The hologram shifted to show a beautiful world 2 systems over. Viridian 7 survivors, living in cities the swarm had built for them. Under atmospheric shields the swarm maintained, growing food in fields the swarm had terraformed. Alive. safe, thinking they'd been captured and imprisoned when they were actually being protected and sustained. The swarm tried to tell them, Johnson said. Sent holographic messages, communication attempts, even built translator interfaces. But the Viridians were so traumatized by the attack that they interpreted everything as psychological warfare. She looked around the room. They're ready to hear the truth now. They've had 6 months to stabilize, to process, to notice that their captors keep bringing them everything they need and asking nothing in return. But they need you to believe it first. They need the coalition to acknowledge what actually happened. General Azila stood, her impressive form rigid with decision. Draft new protocols. First contact, threat assessment, engagement rules, everything. Rewrite it from the ground up with the assumption that communication precedes violence. She looked at Johnson. You'll be heading the training program. I want pot roast Thursdays off, Johnson said immediately. Done. And a promotion. If I'm training the entire coalition military on how not to shoot first and ask questions never, I want commander rank. Done. And the swarm gets official status as coalition auxiliaries, with full diplomatic recognition and protection. Azila's expression was unreadable. Then she nodded. Done. Johnson grinned. Then I guess I'm your new head of xenocommunication protocols. Fair warning, my teaching style involves a lot of kindergarten analogies. If it keeps us from starting another 3-galaxy war, Zilax muttered, you can teach using sock puppets for all I care. Don't give me ideas. 3 months later, the Coalition Defense Academy had a new mandatory course. First Contact Communication Protocols, commonly known as the Johnson Approach. The curriculum covered everything from threat assessment bias to emotional de-escalation, from non-verbal communication across species to the importance of asking questions before shooting. Johnson taught the first class herself, standing in front of 300 cadets from 60 different species. The Johnson approach, she began, is really just common sense that we forgot under pressure. It boils down to this. Before you decide something is a threat, figure out what it wants and why it's here. Revolutionary, I know. Nervous laughter rippled through the auditorium. I'm serious. The Carthrax swarm was literally screaming, "We're trying to help," for millennia, and nobody stopped shooting long enough to parse the message. 3 galaxies, trillions dead, all because we saw scary and immediately went for our guns. She paced across the stage. So here's your first lesson. Scared things lash out. Confused things make mistakes. And things that don't know how to communicate properly will communicate badly. A cadet raised a tentacle. But the swarm had weapons. Massive weapons. So do you, Johnson pointed out. Does that make you automatically hostile? Or does it make you someone who might need those weapons for legitimate purposes? She pulled up a hologram of a killdroid. These units were designed for disaster response, planetary engineering, rapid construction, heavy rescue operations. The weapons were for clearing debris, breaking through obstacles, defending rescued populations from environmental hazards. The fact that they could also be used against military targets was incidental. We couldn't have known that, another cadet protested. You could have asked. Johnson's tone softened. I know it's scary. I know your instinct when faced with something that powerful is to defend yourself. But fear-based decisions cost us 3 galaxies. Understanding-based decisions gave us the most powerful allies we've ever had. She gestured to the window. Outside, swarm units worked alongside coalition engineering teams, building a new space station in 1/10 of the projected time. The killdroids moved with careful precision, their massive forms coordinating with tiny organic workers in a dance of collaborative construction. "That could have been our reality from the start," Johnson said. "Instead, we chose war." The semester progressed. Johnson's classes expanded. She trained admirals and diplomats, engineers and xenopsychologists. The swarm's rescued civilizations began reintegrating with the galactic community, their stories spreading like wildfire. 374 species, all alive, all thriving, all grateful for the swarm that had saved them despite being shot at for their trouble. Coalition First Contact protocols were completely rewritten. Assessment before engagement, communication before escalation, understanding before violence. They called it the Johnson Doctrine. Johnson called it literally just not being an asshole to things you don't understand yet. Both names stuck. On the 74th Thursday since her return, Johnson sat in the Academy mess hall with her pot roast, green beans, and coffee. Unit 4-77 Alpha had taken to joining her for meals. It didn't eat, but it seemed to enjoy the company. She taught it to make a holographic projection that looked like it was drinking tea. "You're really committed to the bit," Johnson told it, gesturing at the projected teacup. The unit's sensors pulsed in what she'd learned was amusement. A junior officer approached, looking nervous. "Commander Johnson, sorry to interrupt, but there's a situation." Johnson sighed. "There's always a situation. What kind?" Unknown vessels appeared at the edge of Coalition space. Heavily armed, not responding to standard hails. Defense fleets are mobilizing. "And you came to me, why?" "Because General Azila said before anyone shoots, someone has to try the Johnson approach." The officer looked embarrassed. "She said you'd know what that means." Johnson stood, grabbing her coffee. Unit 4-77 Alpha rose with her, its teacup vanishing. Unknown vessels, heavily armed, not responding. Yeah, that sounds familiar. She headed for the door, calling back over her shoulder. 10 credits says they're just scared and don't know how to say hello without sounding threatening. You think so? I think we're about to find out. And this time, we're going to ask questions before shooting. Revolutionary, I know. She left the mess hall with Unit 4-77 Alpha following, its sensors already scanning and preparing communication protocols. Behind them, the junior officer scrambled to catch up, wondering how someone could be so calm about a potential invasion. Johnson wasn't calm. She was caffeinated, mildly annoyed at having her pot roast interrupted, and reasonably certain that somewhere in the command center, someone was already overreacting. But she'd stopped one 3-galaxy war by treating scared orphans like scared orphans instead of monsters. She could probably manage one more first contact. "So, what do we know about these ships?" she asked as they headed for the command center. "They're big, heavily shielded, and they're broadcasting something on all frequencies." "What kind of something?" The officer pulled up a data pad. "It's weird. Mathematical sequences, prime numbers, and what might be a children's counting song." Johnson stopped walking. Unit 477 Alpha's sensors pulsed rapidly. The pattern she'd learned meant surprise. "They're doing what I did," Johnson said slowly. "They're trying to communicate non-threateningly using the most universal, innocent signal they can think of." She looked at the unit. "They learned from us." The unit projected a hologram, not of the unknown ships, but of the swarm's own history. Thousands of years of failed first contacts, of violence and misunderstanding. And then, 6 months ago, one human who asked, "Why are you upset?" The hologram showed that message propagating outward, swarm units sharing it with rescued species, those species sharing it further, the concept spreading like ripples in a pond. Somewhere out there, someone else had learned the lesson, had decided to try approaching with gentleness instead of force. "Well," Johnson said, grinning, "guess my teaching methods are catching on." She headed for the command center at a brisk walk, Unit 4-7-7 Alpha beside her, ready to welcome whatever newcomers had decided that maybe, just maybe, the universe didn't have to be quite so hostile after all. Behind them, the Academy continued its lessons. In front of them, the Coalition Defense Fleet held its fire, waiting for communication instead of assuming threats. And throughout it all, 30 million killdroids that had once been called the galaxy's deadliest army continued their actual purpose, building, protecting, and saving everyone they could reach, one patient conversation at a time.